Hey, folks, welcome back to The Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It's 11 o'clock on Friday, May 17th, and it is Stephen Friday once again. I have had an incredible day. And you know what's amazing is this idea of walking with Jesus, right? That's the whole premise. Jesus is alive and he speaks. I'm so thankful for Steve Staggs, and it's just been amazing. God has used not only him, but all of these circumstances, you, the community, everything. And it's amazing when you recognize that all of these things were intentionally planned since the beginning of time. It's hard to imagine, I think, for us, because we have been told so much that we're an accident, right? This is billions and billions of years. You've become this. You've crawled out of the ooze, and here you are. But when you realize who he has made you to be, and you recognize the plan that he has, and that it can include you. It's not requiring you, but it can include you. You can walk with him. And that's really the whole point of this is that there's a living, speaking Jesus who is accomplishing a strategic purpose, an intent for creation, that this is meant to be here for a reason. And you exist, and there is a mission. And that mission starts in a garden and finishes in a city. There is progress, there is direction, there is growth. And we see that in our own lives, and we see that in the scriptures, and we just celebrate it. And so today's going to be about the kingdom of God. And I was going to call it the transfer. I've done one before that was the transfer, and you're going to hear a lot about the transfer. But we'll come back at the end and we'll talk about what the transfer means, because it's really the transfer of you and me, right? It's this conversion of you and me to understand the kingdom and what is the kingdom. But Steve said in one of the episodes, he said, all you have to do is give them a glimpse of the kingdom. You don't have to motivate. You don't have to convince. You don't have to talk someone into it. You just give them a glimpse. And so that's what I hope this replay of episode 22, the second hour, which is one of the most significant for those of us who are in kind of the crypto and financial space. And this fits a lot with what I've talked about in my last two streams as it relates to real world assets and tokenizing the world. We are going to literally turn over the tables of this financial system. I want you to hear from Steve. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I want to say hello to you, Ego Foundation with, amen, the acronym of with. Morning. Good to see you, Sam. Purpose, serve. Absolutely. John May, he made it. Robbie Creates, welcome back, Robbie. And John, good to see you, buddy. You seem like you're in better spirits these days, so I'm going to continue to thank God for you, my friend. Yes, the prayers for John May and his family. I'm glad to see you're alive and kicking, my friend. Hopefully this will be an encouragement to you. So let's jump into the content, and then I'll see you on the other side of this. This is incredible. Enjoy. I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen. I'm like literally trying to pitch you in one nice and slow and right down the middle. So I'm going to share a screen here, and I'm going to find this document. And this is something you shared with me early on. And folks, I want you, if you care about money in the future, which I know you do, you're going to want to listen very carefully to this conversation. So this is going to be the second half of our discussion here. You know it, you feel it, Mr. Anderson, when you go to church and pay your taxes, that there is a transfer coming. And I think the secular world would say, well, the baby boomers are passing away and a lot of money is going to come over to the younger folks. That's not what we're talking about, although there's a piece of it. What is the transfer, Steve? And what is this slide here? Because it has got a lot packed in it.
Yeah. This is in this slide, we could probably spend a month of streams.
Yeah.
Just unpacking what this slide is representing.
Agreed.
I mean, it really is true that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this slide is worth about 100,000 words.
Yeah.
Because in each part of it, it portrays a different picture. So I'll just start by saying, in the hour that we have, we'll kind of keep this at a very, very high level. And then if you want in future streams to go through it in more detail, we certainly can. Um, the basic concept here is that um, there is an economic model represented by both sides of this slide. If you see the blue box in the middle where it says wealth repositories, person, business, institutions, if you kind of draw an imaginary line, vertical line on that, and everything on the left side of the slide is what's currently operating, and what's on the right side of the slide is what is beginning to operate. And there is when we talk about the transfer from the standpoint from a wealth perspective, there is a transfer occurring from the wealth that is represented on the left side of the slide to the right side of the slide. Okay. Now the effect of that is that as that occurs, that's what the dollar signs are representing. As that occurs, then there is a depletion of wealth on the left side and an increase of wealth on the right side. The left side of the system is the left side of the slide is referred to as the wealth extraction system, which basically says this is what the intention of that side of the slide is. And this is the perverse application, excuse me, that's the wrong word, the perverse administration of the wealth system that God created. So this is really a high level spiritual view of what is occurring that will then take shape in the material world that we live in. And so what is this really all about? On the left side of the slide, you mentioned that the system is broken. What I'd like to offer is a slightly different perspective. The system is not broken. The character animating it is rotting. And so what it's doing is it's destroying the intended capability of the system. Now we're back to what you've described before, the gun on the table. See, the systems are neutral. Now, they may, a system that is built to harm, when the right person animates that system can be modified to bless. See, so systems are all neutral. If you take a system that is intended to harm, if you put the right person in there, they just render the system inoperable. They just don't use it. See, so it becomes worthless. So the thing to recognize is that we have creative abilities because we are made in the image and likeness of God. We possess His physical attributes. We also possess the elements of His nature and character that He develops over time. And so He teaches us how to build systems. Satan hasn't built a one of these, by the way. He does not have creative abilities. That is reserved for the Elohim man, as we've talked about, who is operating with his God, who has creative abilities. Creativity is one of the fundamental elements of choice. And so the creative mind says, here's what exists. How do I make that better? Oh, that's the exercise of choice. It's the evaluation of circumstances. It's the determination of value. And then there is a modification that occurs as a result of creative abilities. We call it innovation. Same concept. So Satan hasn't created a thing. He just hijacks what has been created. So he has taken the wealth production system that God has built, entrusted that to man, and then he has perverted it. And how has he perverted it? He has turned it, if you look on the right side, he's converted it from a wealth production system to a wealth extraction system. Now, the issue with that is that when you extract wealth, eventually you extract too much of it. And when you extract too much of it, what happens is you have none left over to reproduce it. So there is a failure element built into it because it's perverse. So what does this wealth extraction system do? It exploits, it controls, it distracts, it punishes, it steals from the enslaved who are the wealth producers. If we pause for just a moment and say, who is it that produces wealth and how is wealth produced? In both questions, there is something at the center of that, and that center is mankind.
Yep.
Okay? Wealth cannot be produced apart from man.
Yep.
That's as simple as it is. So man is the wealth producer. And how does he produce wealth? He takes the resources that he did not create and then utilizes those resources to produce value in excess of what they possess on their own. Okay. So a grain of wheat that's growing wild out in the field that the man sees some deer eating on. He's hungry. He goes out there. He chews on himself. Says, "Wow, I can eat this too." What does he do? He then takes his innovative capabilities. He clears out the land and he just takes that seed and he builds it to where there's an entire field out there that now supplies food for both him and everybody that he knows. The deer doesn't know how to do that.
Yep.
The deer doesn't have the capability, the innovative capability to do that. Only man possesses that capability. So what Satan does on his side is he wants to control that capability. And when he controls that capability, he will allow the wealth producer to receive what you and I have called the cost of wealth. He will not allow him to receive a portion of the wealth that he produces. And right there is the mechanism of enslavement. Okay? So that's on that left side. What that left side has to do is that left side has to, in order to keep the wealth producer continuing to labor and labor and labor, so it produces the margin that we call wealth above his, his labor, he has to create a scarcity delusion. He has to create the impression that scarcity exists when in reality there's an abundance that exists. All of creation tells us of the abundance that is here. You look in the ocean at the fish, you look at the fields with the crops, you look at the buffalo that were in herds of millions, in the plains. It does not matter where you look. The stars that are in the sky, the entirety of the creation is screaming at us its abundance. And yet we are told that we live in scarcity.
Yeah. Can I interject here for just one second?
Yes.
I just want to review this because this is huge. For anyone who is watching this now live or later, there is so much packed here that it's just mind numbing. But if you're somebody that's in crypto, like I am and you are, this is so fundamental to your understanding because people kick around these words all the time and you're going to hear the base layer here. And I just want to reiterate what you said because it's so powerful. At the top of this slide, it says the transfer money, wealth, and wealth producers. Right underneath it, it says all wealth is a product of human labor. So this one massive point is everything that is related to wealth is based on the creativity of God's man, and that's you and me.
Yep.
What's interesting here is that red arrow that says mammon, right? And in parentheses, it says Satan. It says current world order, money is God. Will you explain those three statements there and how that is characteristic of this left-hand side?
Yes. Once you get the general concept of what this left side of the slide is intending to do, what it's designed to accomplish, and how it functions. Once you at that fundamental level, now you can go in and you can step back and start asking the questions: why? Why does it function like this, and who caused it to function in that manner? Okay, so why does it function in this way? So as to extract resource. Well, why is there a need to extract resource? To finance intention.
Yeah.
What do you want to do when you finance intention? Accomplish an outcome. Okay.
You know what's so awesome about that? It's so funny you say that because in crypto, everyone says when Lambo. It's a joke, right? It's a meme. But this is really great. I just want to say it because it hit me really well. It's like, what am I planning in my mind to do with the excess?
Yeah.
That's like what's driving most people in crypto. They're
Yeah.
basically going, when this next bull run comes, this time I'm not going to be, I'm going to be able to have some liquid so that I can make sure I sell at the top, right?
Mhm.
And I'm going to maximize the extraction that I get that's disproportionate to me because I'm smart and I made good decisions and I have my fluffy slippers on. And I'm going to plan what I'm going to do or what I think that excess money is going to do for me and the things I care about when Lambo.
Yes.
I love
And
that.
by
That
the-
intention, it fuels intention. I love that.
And guess what? You don't use your base investment to do that.
Right.
You use the margin to do that.
That's right. That's right.
See? Well, guess what? That's because you're the one who gets the margin. But what would happen if somebody else heisted that margin?
Yeah.
See? Well, guess what? They would use it for their purposes.
Yeah.
To do exactly what they want, to produce it and finance the outcomes that they're looking for. Okay, so who is that? Who is it that's doing the extracting? Okay. Well, now we're back to this. Okay. All wealth is a product of human labor. Yep. The human exerts their labor. That labor produces an abundance beyond what they use to produce that wealth. There is a margin that occurs. Well, who gets to use the margin? Well, on the left side of the slide, the one who's extracting that margin is this one in the parentheses called Mammon, Satan in parentheses. Now, for those who have spent time um, in the New Testament and studying any of the things that Jesus has said, he made this one statement that says you cannot serve God and mammon. He begins that statement by saying you cannot serve two masters or two lords. So what he does is he likens mammon to a lord, a master, in the same way that he identifies God as a lord and a master. Now we know God is a lord and a master, but who is this lord and master that he calls mammon? Well, his name in the heavenlies, we call him Satan, but in the heavenlies, Satan is known as Mammon. He is the Lord. He is the Lord of the system that he has hijacked. And what he does is, out of this current world order, this system has designed to produce an order, meaning it is a mechanism that is designed to achieve an outcome. Okay. Anybody who has a family knows that in your family, you have a particular order. The family operates in an orderly manner. Some people may look at that as disorder. Some people may look at that as hyper order. It doesn't matter. It's a form of order. It is the way that your family operates. It is not only the processes, the intentions, the procedures for how it works when the kids go to bed, school, et cetera, et cetera. You get that part of it. Well, that's the same thing. The current world order, Satan has arranged this and administered this to function in a particular way to achieve an outcome that enables him to extract the wealth in order to use that wealth to produce his intentions, his plan. Okay? So that's what that order does. And he does that by making money God. Now, what do we mean when we say money is God? Well, the fundamental role of God is to, when we think of it, we think of God as the creator, yes, but more so we think of God as the one who has absolute rule and authority. It is the all-powerful. It is the almighty. God is all-powerful, almighty, all-knowing. Okay? And so money is positioned to be God. In other words, money is the thing that enables all things to be done or to keep other things from being done. Now, the way that we've heard it in the past is he who holds the gold makes the rules. Well, what is that saying? I have the gold, i.e. the money, and when I have the money, I get to be God. I get to make all the rules.
Yep.
Well, that's exactly what's happened on the left side of the slide. By making money God, God becomes the thing, the most powerful element within his order. It becomes the thing most sought after. It becomes the thing most prized. It becomes the thing that tells you it is capable of doing whatever you want done. Whatever dream you have, whatever need you must resolve, it will provide that for you. Money is God. And so what happens is the way that looks is, for example, we'll just talk about people even in the church. I believe God has called me to the ministry. Okay, well, what is usually the first question? If you've ever talked with anybody, who has come to you and asked you for advice or counsel about that, the very first question they'll have is, how am I going to make a living?
Yep.
Well, what are they referring to? The money called God. And when Jesus says you can't serve that guy, because the moment you put money in the position of being the first question, you have elevated that thing to the highest point of power in your life.
Wow. Steve, it just dawned on me, and I hadn't ever thought about this the same way. When he sent out the disciples, he told them not to take anything with them.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Yep. And then he asked them at the end, when you were with me, was there anything that you lacked?
Wow.
So there, like I said, we could spend on virtually every line item here. We could spend an entire episode on these things because it is just that rich and deep.
Well, this is the red pill, folks. This is the Matrix red pill. So let me ask you this, because this dawns on me too. So, we hear in historic, terms, the concept of slavery,
Yeah.
right? We look at the Bible and we look at the Israelites being enslaved. And so what we have as our understanding of slavery is that you are held against your will.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, we were in captivity. We were in bondage. And what's really interesting about this is we just talked about infinite resolution. We talked about, how these things repeat themselves, how we see this as the form and function of creation. And let me ask you this. And is this a good connection? In this current world order where God or money is God, and that we are basically we would commonly say, well, yeah, slavery's bad. Child sex slavery is bad, and slavery in America was bad, and slavery back in the day was bad. But the cleverness of the fact that this system is actually the same thing, that it
Yes.
is literally enslaving us because we're essentially giving our authority over to it. And we're saying, yeah, my God is money.
Yep. That is it. That is
And,
exactly right. And
and you are a captive to it.
test it out. You want to do something? What is the first thing you're going to ask? How am I going to pay my bills?
Yep.
Now, we can get into philosophical arguments about or discussions about that all day long. But we're talking in this stream about, this base code
Yeah.
element.
Yeah.
What is the base code? On the left side of the slide, the base code is there has been a hijacking of God's financial system, and that hijacking has converted it from a wealth production system to a wealth extraction system that exploits and controls and enslaves. And the way it does that is by making money God.
Is
And if
this
you question that, ask yourself what the first question is you ask if you want to do something that causes you to put your labor in question, or
yeah.
who you have given your labor to. If you remove that, what do you then do? Oh my goodness, I've got to I've got to pay the bills. I can't do what you asked me to do, God. How am I going to pay the bills?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, just pause for a second and unpack that very legitimate concern that we don't know how to deal with because it is noise that distracts us from the fundamental question.
It seems like this is another lie. Okay,
Yes.
so we talked about in the beginning, the serpent, Satan gets into the garden through the serpent and lies to Eve. And what I think is so amazing about this is, and help me know if I got this right, that when, what is Mammon doing? What is Satan doing in this scenario? Is once again doing what he does, lies. And in that lie is exploitation, control, distraction, punishing, enslavement. But it's a lie again. It's saying that one, there is no God, but two, your God shall be money. And that's the system. That's how I will enslave you, is I will get you to agree with me that you can't do anything without my controlling God, which is money.
Yes. Um, but if you were to say that overtly, we'd
Right,
all
right.
flip him the bird.
And that's what we're saying. That's
Yeah.
why we're here.
Yeah. That's why we're here saying, okay, what we're doing is we're putting vocabulary to what he's saying.
Yeah.
We're penetrating through the noise and the distraction and the misdirection. See? And so the issue is not that man is not to work. The issue is not that man is not productive. The issue is not that man exercises choice. It's that man, when he exercises choice, that becomes his sovereign decree for himself. So if you think strategically and you're on the left side of the slide and your name is Mammon and what you're trying to do is extract the wealth produced by that man, would you go in and put a gun to his head and say either give me your bank account or you're dead? Well, that could be effective for a single event, but what would you do? You would try to convince him that your system, your order, is the appropriate order that blesses and benefits him. Okay. And so he gives himself or herself to the order. Okay. So let's kind of get a look at how this works, the cycle of this, so that we can then go into some of the details of it. What happens is, once again, on the left side of the slide, wealth must be pooled in order to create this illusion, this delusion of scarcity. And so what you begin to see in this is that this wealth, the excess wealth that man is able to produce, that's nearly inexhaustible, It has to go somewhere. Now, in the parable of the man who built the crops and was so prospered that he had to build all of these barns and stuff, that's a picture. It just keeps filling up. That
BlackRock.
well, there would be an example of BlackRock. That's right. See,
There's some barns.
there are some barns out there. There are individuals called Bezos that is a barn, um, where these exorbitant amounts of wealth are produced and they have to be pooled. So they go into now this blue kind of rectangle in the center called a wealth repository. These could be individuals, these could be businesses, these could be institutions, but the idea is there has to be a place where the excess wealth is transferred to and then pooled in order to create this illusion of scarcity.
See, we're telling our men in this culture that if you don't produce and pool, and we're going to give you a card, a report card. It's going to be, you're going to be judged. Who you are is based on this number in this bank account, in this barn. And that the culture has told men especially that you're not anyone of value unless you can pool this money.
Yep.
We're swimming in the depths of that in crypto. That who you are is your bank account, and this is the scorecard. And if you got a big scorecard, you're a winner. And what you're saying here, this lie that's been told, I mean, it's pervasive through this system.
Yes.
Is that who you are is what you can produce, and who you are is what you can pool. And the people that we would admire in our culture, and it's exactly this lie, is the Bezos, right? It's the Musk. It's the people who have pooled as much as possible. And the world, in the culture, rewards those and says, you are a winner.
Yes. Yes. And guess what this money god does? It gives you power.
Yeah.
See, if you will play by my rules and make me your God, I will give you power.
Isn't that what Satan said to Jesus coming out of the wilderness? He's like,
Exactly.
turn these stones into bread. I'll give you this whole thing.
Yep. Yep. I'll give it all to you if you just bow down and call me your superior. That's what the definitions of the words say. Bow down before me and declare me as your superior. I will give you all of this. And Jesus says, no, that doesn't how it works. By the way, it's already mine.
So
you're not giving me anything. It's already mine.
So would a term to add to the left-hand side of this slide be power?
Well, power is part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of the reward. That's what incentivizes those individuals, businesses, and institutions to participate as reservoirs, as repositories of the wealth, because what they gain in response is power. I mean, think about the amount of power that Bezos, any of them, Musk, you just go right down the line.
Yeah.
See, just think of the enormous amount of power that they have. But what do we do all the time? We look at, we call George Soros the big bad wolf, and we say, look at all these things he's doing because he's got this whacked out, way that he wants to control the world, yada, yada, yada. No, he has no political agenda other than to create disruption. Why? Because he's a currency trader. And the world currency is US dollars. So where is the greatest value to be extracted on the left side of the slide, except through the mechanism of volatility? The greater the volatility, the greater the margin, the more wealth I extract.
Well, and what's amazing too is I keep hearing these things, Jesus speaking through the word. You can even take this to favoritism. Jesus talks about, hey, don't just take the person who's dressed really nice and has the ring and does all this stuff and put them in this high place.
Yeah.
And I think what's amazing is how much commentary there is from Jesus around this model.
Yes.
And saying, listen, you're going to, think about this. Elon Musk shows up at your door, Jeff Bezos, we fawn over people, and that's this power that they exert, right? Celebrity, money is people we have in our culture, especially. We admire this power and we give it energy by giving favoritism to those who exert it over us.
Yes. And now we say, why? Because they are our gods. We don't think about it in those terms overtly.
Right.
But that is exactly what happens. Oh, if I want something, think about this, for a minute from an investment standpoint. A friend of ours has been going through this for some time, trying to make this break. That what do? Oh, I need money in order to be invested in my project so that I can do what God asked me to do. So what do? You go to the people with money and you try to sell them on your idea that this is a good investment. What are you doing that for? Because you're asking for them to provide you the power that is necessary in order for you to get your project done. And the moment you do that, you are now declaring money as your God, and you're not even thinking in those terms. It's a noise that has become so common to us, we don't even recognize that it's there. And yet we do it all the time.
Okay. So let me use a practical example of this.
Okay.
So I'm somebody who says, "Hey, Jesus, you're the only one that has authority to speak to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to listen to you. And I'm going to hear from you, and you're going to have a calling." So one of the callings I talk about a lot is unlocking global generosity by giving, right? He's given me a lot of pictures of that. He's given me physical items that reinforce that and all of these things.
Yes.
And what I hear you saying directly to me in this is he either spoke to you or he didn't, Matt. Either he spoke to you something that he wants to partner with you on. Okay, so let's just make that assumption. Yes, and I believe that's true. But let's just say this with anyone. You understand that he calls you out to something. And what you're saying is in the practical, we often go back to Mammon and Satan and this God money and say, this is the reason I can't do this thing that God's called me to, because I don't have the money. Yeah. And this is what this is saying to me is, if in fact Jesus is speaking to you, it's because he is the vine, you're the branches, and he has something for you to do. If you recognize that he owns it all, that actually provision isn't primary, it's barely secondary. That actually you following him and you moving forward with him in partnership with him, that actually the result of that following is provision.
That is it. We haven't gotten to the right side of the slide.
I know, isn't it crazy?
We're just talking about the
40 minutes on Satan today.
Well, it's important because this is where we are. If you're going to get someplace, there's two pieces of information that are absolutely vital. One is where you're going, but the other is where you are. And so this is where we are in this slide. And so you're exactly right, Matt, when you're hearing that, is that if Jesus is saying, I need you to do something, I need you to partner with me, Matt, to unlock global generosity through the mechanism of giving, you have a choice. You can take off on that on your own and try to make it in your own deal, or you can say, okay, Jesus, how do you want to do that?
Yeah.
That question will determine which side of the slide that you're going to operate on. If you take it and move it on your own, which by example with Jesus, how am I going to pay the bills? Okay, I'll tell you what, you provide me the money first and then I'll do it. Well, isn't that my story with the house a few episodes ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus, what do you want me to do? I want you to go. If I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Okay, I get it. I'll take you at your word. I'm not going to believe you, but I don't have a choice. What do you want me to do? I got $20 left. I got two little kids and a wife out there who is wondering what the heck wacko dad is up to this time, right? What do you want to do? Tell me. I want you to go buy a house. Right on. Apparently you haven't checked my bank account lately. I got $20. What was the first thing that I said to him? Well, hey, if you want to provide me with $25,000, I'm happy to do that. What have I done at that moment?
Yeah, you've inserted.
Yep.
Different God.
I have inserted the superiority of money over the command of the one who owns it all. Now, why did I do that? Because I didn't understand how this thing works.
What an invitation it is, and you see so many examples of this too, where, what we think is the structure is it's so disruptive. Jesus calling you out of the boat, or this idea that, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this, and him literally saying, don't take anything with you. And, we think about, there's so many stories. We've heard this so many times, right? Somebody gets fired from a job and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so many times people look back in retrospect at these things and they're like, you know what? I burned the boats, man. I just went for it. And it is amazing how these things came. And it was the defining difference is that, I guess I would use the term faith, but it's also we talk about the packet of faith that is given to you. What an amazing thing that, what are we saying? All right, God wants to partner with you. He's alive and he speaks. Ask him, ask him. He wants to partner with you. Okay. Hey, I want you to unlock global generosity. Okay. That's the decree from the guy who owns it all. Let's move forward. And to think that what seems so practical in life, and a lot of very practical people say, well, how are you going to finance that, Mr. Dreamer?
Yeah.
And it's so counterintuitive because the system itself has been set up to make money our God. It's
To
amazing.
distract us
Yes.
so that we will continue to labor and produce wealth that can be extracted. Okay. Now the fallacy in the whole thing is the amount of wealth that is produced on the left side of the screen is a fraction of what is produced on the right side of the screen. But we'll get there eventually. Let's finish this concept again. Okay. Okay, give me $25,000, God, and I'm more than happy to go out. So what have I done? I have made my partnering with him conditioned upon him subjecting himself to my requirement, which is to make God, my money, my God.
Wow.
And the moment I do that, then everything that is produced out of that stays and cycles through the left side of the screen. You see the subtlety that's in there? And Satan didn't put a gun to my head. He just taught me how his system works, how his order functions, and I just naturally cooperate with it and go with it. And I don't even know I'm doing it. I think I'm being shrewd. I think I'm being responsible. I think I'm being, an upfront guy who's trying to take care of things. Well, what was the reality? Okay, Jesus, I'll do what you asked me to do. What did I do with that next decision? I set aside the God of money. I set the master of mammon aside. What then happened within the next 4 hours? I was the owner of a house with 20 bucks in my pocket.
Yep.
How does that happen?
Yep.
Well, because he owns it all. And he's proactive. He proacts. And when he speaks something, everything has already been put in place to accomplish the very thing he spoke. I send forth my word. It accomplishes the purpose for which I sent it. It will not return to me void or empty. I am God, not mammon.
What's funny is in our community, there's people doing TA left and right, looking at charts, trying to predict the future. We talk to people who are whales and all these kind of things. And you've got all kinds of commentary on who's smarter, who's not, what we're watching, watching these cycles and everything. And, I think everyone's trying to get an edge, right? And so some of the people that have had some success in crypto, you're like, I was here since 2015 and I've been through these cycles and I know what they look like. Yeah, there's some wisdom in that. You've seen how these cycles work. But it's really so fundamentally a shift in your intention in your mind because, it's really difficult to be on the right-hand side of this slide unless you're actually listening to him. Because to have something that truly operates on the right-hand side, it requires really his power, his calling, his direction, his plan that you come in alignment with. I was thinking about that as a calling. It's not something that it's like, no, this is what I'm doing because he's out front, right? We've got this assumption that he's like, well, I need you. No, this is what I'm doing. And it's amazing to think that when we ask the living Jesus, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do next? I remember, thinking about the idea of holding each thought captive. Well, why would I do that? I do it because I recognize the fact that you own it all and that you're the source of all life and you're the source of all resourcing. And I don't do it so that I get money. I do it because there's so much wrapped up in it. There's so much benefit wrapped up in it, and namely peace and rest and fruit and joy and all of the things that come along with. And it's the thing, it's crazy. We put money in the place and we essentially go out and try to rent peace. And it never fulfills us. Whatever it may be, drugs, alcohol, money, relationships, Lambos. We take the little hit of it. And that's the thing it gives you is a little hit that satiates you for a little bit of time, but it leaves you empty without peace. And it's amazing. Like there is this future because it's interesting how we talk about this and it relates to wealth. But in reality, it's actually the right-hand side of the slide is wrapped up in so much more than wealth, right? It's this definition actually of the thing I think people are really longing for, which is actually peace.
Well, they see, once again, we have been taught that God reacts to our situation. Yeah. And so what he's doing is God is now moving to do something on our behalf because he's going to deal with the perversions that occur.
Yeah.
No, that isn't how he operates. He does not react. That isn't what he does. So let's get to another one of these baseline elements. In the left side of the slide, there is a circulation that has to happen. There is the exertion of the wealth of the labor. There is the production of the wealth from that labor. That labor now has to be put somewhere as it grows and multiplies, and has to go into a wealth repository to be stored and pooled to create this illusion of scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
It then moves out of the wealth repository back into the current world order so that to enable Satan to finance his plan on the planet. And it keeps cycling through that, So what happens? The money, the wealth that's produced, Mammon pushes that wealth to the wealth repository. When he needs to, he'll call upon it. It will then come back up into the current world order and then recycle through that. It'll keep cycling. Well, the question is, how does that happen? What is the one thing that must occur in order for that left side of the slide to work?
Man's authority.
One thing. Well, that's what's necessary. So what must man do in order for his authority to become accessible and under the control of the current world order? What must man do? Well, here it is. He must act and decide apart from Jesus.
Wow.
That's what he has to do. He has to act and decide apart from Jesus. That's the one thing that has to happen. You remove that element, and this left side of the slide can't work. Okay, so what is it that makes the right side of the slide work by contrast? Everything you do is in partnership with and in response to what Jesus says to do. You do not do one thing apart from him. Oh, wow. Is that what you meant, Jesus, when you said you do not do one thing apart from the Father? That's right. See? Why? Because that's what makes the kingdom work. That's how it works. You operating apart from me is what makes the left side of the slide work. You operating with me is what makes the right side of the slide work. See? Isn't that exactly what I had your brother Paul say to you? Anything that is not of faith is sin, is apart from me. What is sin, Steve? It's anything that's apart from you. No matter what it looks like, how good it looks like, or how bad it looks. Anything that's done apart from me is sin. Well, where does faith come from? Oh, through what you speak, Jesus. Yes. How is man supposed to live? By every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That's how man is to live. That's how the right side of my slide works. So the left side of the slide works with you acting independent of me. That's what activates it. Okay? So you want to stop with all the nonsense that's going on the left side of the slide? Quit making decisions all by yourself. Learn to listen to me and partner with me. And guess what? I'll take you from the Hugo that you're operating on the left side to the Lambo on the right side that you've always dreamed about having. Okay? These two systems are so different in their makeup. The left side is a scarcity model. The right side is an abundance model. The left side is a poor representation of the very essence and capability of everything on the right side. Why do you think the Apostle John described heaven as having streets of gold?
Yeah.
See, the two worlds are universes apart in their functioning capability and how they are expressed. It's just that we look at the left side of the slide and we think the Lambo that we drive is the ultimate.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, hey man, why don't you live in a Lambo environment? You think that's the ultimate? You haven't seen anything.
You know what's amazing about this though? I mean, it's so huge. I'm just, I kind of get overwhelmed by this because it makes you examine your own actions, right? It makes you examine your actions, and it makes you examine your language. And how am I giving power to this recursive system of God as money, right? This money God. And what's amazing to me, we've been talking about what does it mean to be in the game.
Yeah.
Steve, you and I talk offline, and you know that we're in the game.
Yes,
and
we are
I had this
in the game.
I had this experience the other day. I told you about this, but I want folks to hear this. I did a stream a couple streams ago, just freaking out. It was my hopium stream because I saw literally Jesus wink at me. It was like as amazing of a realization that all of this is real. And I constantly get those reminders, but this was one of the biggest ones. This is like a top 5 in my life. Folks, I'm doing my best to follow the calling that Jesus has given me, which is to unlock global generosity by giving. And examining that in all of its potential facets, right? But also just paying attention and being interested in what does this look like? Well, a friend of mine went to a conference on the other side of the planet and really didn't know why he went, and met a couple that did exactly what we were looking for. But what's amazing is when we talked to them, they had exactly what, like, they were the exact right people for us to talk to, and it was not intentionally set up. It was by quote unquote accident, right? Serendipitous. Well, when you think about this, walking these things out, that if Jesus is out front, we recognize his voice, he's strategic, and we're an extension of him, right? We're not putting our hand to it because he's the one that's out front. Then what does he do? The woman, this couple that we talked to, for the last 10 years, they've been listening to Jesus talk about the transfer, this. And they just happen to be in an industry that we need to have a person that's an expert. And what was amazing about it, it wasn't the dynamics of the industry. It was the fact that these folks, we talked about the exact same thing. That this Jesus we talk about, which I think to a lot of people seems like, oh yeah, you're God in the sky. No, no, no. The same exact thing that Jesus has been saying to me for the last 10 years. He's been saying to a couple that lives on the other side of the world. And when they heard it, I mean, literally the hair stood up on the back of my neck. The 2 guys that were on with me started tearing up. And you go, what you're seeing is this manifestation of the truth, which is that this system on the left-hand side is a lie.
Yeah.
And then if you're willing to step out of the boat and you're willing to walk with him, and we don't put our hand to it because he's already done it. He already has predestined this since the beginning of time, that you were created for these purposes. And when you come in alignment with that, but here's the crazy thing, Steve, I'm not looking at it as the money.
No.
It represents a lot of money, but what's really amazing about it is it says, what does it say? The scripture that says, delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And I always, immaturely thought, oh, well, he's going to give me what I want. But in reality, when I follow him, he actually gives me the desires of my heart.
Yes.
It's his desires become my desires.
Yes.
And so I don't think about, well, if I have a bunch of money because dealing with this guy in this industry, I'll be able to buy a Lambo and people will get to look at me and I'll get to wear the Rolex and people will, I'll socially signal to them that I'm better than they are. No, what he's actually giving me in the desires of my heart is, imagine what could happen if this is unlocked. And here's the crazy thing, Steve. What he's saying is, he's saying about money at all.
No.
This is actually how I am revealing myself to my man.
Yeah, right. I mean, to the farmer, is the wheat the objective in the farmer? I mean, he doesn't go out there and covet the wheat. No, he partners with the creation. He releases his labor. He takes the produce, and what does he do with the produce? He blesses and protects if he's doing it right. He blesses his family. He blesses his friends. He protects the requirements for nourishment of people around him. And then guess what he does? He takes that money and then he recycles it again. And it cycles through and it keeps cycling through. What's happening right now is we're operating on the left side of the slide. And one of the things I hope that that happens, it's certainly happened with you and I and others, is we have begun to talk in terms of the left side and right side of the slide.
Yeah.
Jesus, will you show us how to no longer energize the left side of the slide? Will you teach us how to take what you have entrusted to us to bring it into the right hand side of the slide?
And that's what we call the kingdom.
Where wealth can be produced, real wealth, just not money, real wealth.
You know what, Steve? There's a pitfall in this, and I find myself falling into this pit all the time. And I'm going to use a really extreme example to illustrate this pitfall. And we all fall into this, I feel like. Jesus, help me win the lottery.
Yeah.
So that I can do good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a pitfall. And I'm seeing it in like Technicolor right now.
Yeah.
What we want is we want Jesus to produce for us so that then we can go our own way apart from him and participate on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think is really important to note in all of this is that I think that's how we look at the bull run. I think that's how we look at crypto. And if anyone has participated and seen that kind of the mad gains, man, from my diamond hands, is what they have seen is that what you really want is the sin that I really want, right? That I've been coveting. And that is make me rich so I can be somebody. That'll hit you right between the eyes. Make me rich. I'll play in your right-hand side of your slide so I can go back to the left and get mine.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who are preaching Jesus. This is the prosperity gospel thing. It's like, I'm going to use you to extract wealth so that I can go and be somebody on the left. And the biggest difference, and this is huge for me to recognize, is the fact that if I have anything, it's because of him. If I have breath, it's because of him. If I've got resources, it's because of him. And the interesting thing here is, what if you do find yourself in charge of 10 cities?
Yeah.
What if you do find yourself with authority? And then I look at this life and I'm going, hold on a second. This is the test of this life, is that are you going to be an extension of me? Because the way I operate, I have it all and I operate by blessing and protecting. And now it makes so much sense to me, is that if we're to hold each thought captive, that whatever we have in plenty or in want, that it is all for the sake of following his purposes, because we then partner with him and the kingdom comes
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
his will is done. The problem is, I love this idea. Let's get rich, Steve. Let's live in a Lambo. But you know what I'm actually doing? It reminds me, and it really tests my own heart to go, no, what I really want is I just want you to make me rich so that I can go over to this left-hand slide so I can be hanging out with Bezos on his boat. This is the big issue here, is that this kingdom of God, this following of Jesus, is not about you amassing wealth, but it's also not about making you feel guilty that you need to, because I think what ends up happening is that people that have wealth, let's say you're somebody that's a big crypto whale and you've got a lot of money, the left-hand side of the slide, and especially within the ministry and Christian church left-hand side of the slide, is to make you feel guilty that you've got something and that you need to be separate from him. Don't listen to him. Listen to me. I'm the one guilting you for having money. So you need to give that to me. You need to help me in this left-hand side. And the difference is this: if you're somebody that's sitting on a bunch of resources, the answer is always the same. And that is, Jesus is alive and he speaks. And if you ask him, he'll tell you. And that if we hold every thought captive, whether you have a lot of money or a little money, that's the way. And if he gives you the desires of your heart, then if he's willing to tell you about unlocking global generosity, well, he's damn sure he's going to tell you what to do with the next buck. But if you're not recognizing who he is, and there's so much incentive built into actually following him, it's where there's so much more than just the dopamine hit, then what ends up happening is even the things that seem good might actually be evil. And that's why we must constantly be seeking the next step and holding each thought captive to, what do you want me to do next? Because I almost feel like I even treat this goal, unlocking global generosity, as a destination, and it's not a destination whatsoever.
Well, one of the things, Matt, is when you look at Jesus in the New Testament, do you get the impression that he was bogged down?
No.
Do you think that he was burdened in his relationship with his Father?
No.
Or do you get the sense that he was perhaps the most fluidly operating human being who's ever stepped on the planet?
Yep.
See, he just moved fluidly. In fact, he described it like the wind.
Yeah.
You don't know where the wind's coming or going. You just see that it has impacted and affected you. That so is everyone who is led by the Spirit. See? No, what does that mean? You're at first you're going to crab walk to do these things because it's such a new discipline in the way that you live. But eventually it becomes like breathing. There is no encumbrance. There is no burdening. It is the most fluid way of living that you can imagine. In fact, it's called being free.
It's called being free. Woo. Okay, I've listened to that multiple times, and that just like squarely hits me right in between the eyes. I'm really thankful that you're here for this. It's amazing to me how much wisdom, right? Because it's the truth, right? What did Jesus say? I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And you think about, what are we trying to do? We're trying to understand, what is this all about? Why am I here? What's the meaning of this? And to have a guy like Steve, that, I joked that when I first met him, I was like, is he an angel? Well, as a messenger, he is bringing a message to us of saying, "Hey, I've asked the guy who made it all, and he told me how it works." And what's amazing about this is the truth is probable, right? If somebody says something, you're like, "That isn't true. That's not true." Well, you ask questions and you probe it, and you want to find out its error. And what's amazing is I probed this stuff, and what's incredible about it is, this model of left hand side of the slide, this transfer, this is a tool. Okay. So this is the best way that Steve could put together how this works, right? And he asked Jesus, how does this work? And it's amazing that as you dive back into the scriptures of all these stories and everything, it becomes so multifaceted, and it like sparkles, right? You like turn it and the light, shines at you in a new way. And you're literally like in awe of the fact that, okay, you have designed a way. In fact, you are the way, but you've designed something that is abundant in nature. And he shares the concept of the farmer. A farmer is actually not producing wheat. A farmer's labor and decision to get up in the morning and to plow the field and to plant the seed. But if you think about it, the farmer doesn't create wheat. God created the wheat itself and the seed. And when you think about one seed going in, coming up and growing, and then having this kernel, well, it is yield. One thing becomes many things. And God is the God of multiplication, and his system is multiplied in abundance. We see it with corn. One corn turns into a stalk of corn, which turns into 2 or 3 ears of corn, which has 16 rows. And it's like, hold on, or 8 rows, yeah, 16 rows. And it's like, this is the picture of abundance that we didn't create. We didn't create that system. We were born into that system. That is the design of creation. And it is one that we look out at and we go, wow, it's abundant by nature. What's amazing to me is we're coming into a technological advancement where we're going to see the abundance, the true abundance of God, right? He said, John called it the streets of gold. Well, what is this kingdom? Because what we're finding out is that we're the ones that are making the decisions. He gave us authority over this place, right? Here we are. We're looking around as, wow, this is pretty cool. And you've given me authority. Well, I'm like you. I know the difference between good and evil, and I have the ability to make a choice. And so, what is the net effect of these choices? What's the aggregate of these choices? Well, there is one who prowls around seeking to devour you, but also to control you. And so the culture says to you, which is just a manifestation of this left hand side of the slide, that, hey, you could be somebody if you were rich. And it's a trap. And he said this, I wrote it down. He said, um, give yourself to the order because you think it will benefit you, but it actually enslaves. Right. So we think about this. I think about guys that are like, follow my 12-step program or whatever it is, get yours, super discipline, all of these things. Right. Well, there's an element of things like being healthier. You probably can be more effective in your production. Right. Being healthier, you can focus obviously on listening to Jesus more. There are all kinds of, discipline related things. But when it comes down to it, is that this definition of sin, which we think is like, oh, it's just sexual immorality, or it's just like cheating on your wife, or that's real sin. No, what it's really defined is anything that's apart from him. And so if you think about what this is, this God of money, this mammon, who's basically, Jesus said, you can't serve God and money. What it's doing to us is saying, okay, there's a system, and then if I can get this my own, right, I can get mine at your expense, or I'll just get mine because I see that it gives me power. And so we've been intoxicated by this offer. And this offer is, wow, when Lambo, and it's just an illustration of the fact that, well, if I had more of this, I would be okay. And it's this constant, you know, pain, which is to say, there is a practical nature. Like if you can't pay the rent, like money makes a difference. If you're getting kicked out of your house, you don't have electricity. I mean, there are real ramifications in not having the resources. But what's amazing is this system that is meant to extract, we can point out things that are obviously wrong. Like, hey, we're taking all the money that's from taxation in America and giving it to Ukraine. Well, yeah, I mean, it did take a genius to figure that one out. But what's amazing is my brother-in-law was in Geneva, right? If you think of Switzerland, and he was literally just imagining how much wealth is stored underneath the streets of Geneva. Well, those are the storehouses. And if you think about the wealthy families, and I don't mean the publicly rich, I mean the privately rich, the ones that have literally, vaults and vaults and vaults of gold. It's just sitting there, and it's clotted. You know, Steve talked about this idea of the blood flow, right? Life is in the blood. And this idea of what is a blood clot, but it's where literally the blood coagulates and gets stiff and it doesn't flow. If you think about what is Satan's plan on this left-hand side of the slide with Mammon, it's literally to clot the flow, because that's where you get asymmetry, and that's where you get volatility, and that's where you get the ability to extract. And what's amazing is we talk about the kingdom of God. It is one in which it flows. Why? Because the kingdom, they asked Jesus how to pray. And he said, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." So we're basically saying, you're the boss. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Your kingdom come. So if it needs to come, it means that this isn't it. And we know why, because we're going our own way. In this vision, in this amazing thing, when I met Steve, he said, "I've been called to the men of the transfer." And this is what he was talking about. And what I'm amazed by is he's called to me. That the Lord Jesus said, "Hey, there are going to be guys out there that need to know this stuff. You've asked me." And he literally has given a gift to me to say, okay, what is this transfer? This transfer isn't a transfer of money. It's a transfer of me. It's a transfer of you to a new way of thinking. Because here's the thing. You ask a guy like Tom Brady, he's sitting on 4 or 5 rings, and it's like, God, don't I need to do another one? There's no peace in his life whatsoever. And it's interesting, a guy like Paul, he was in prison and all sorts of things. He's like, whether in plenty or in want, it's this peace that transcends all understanding. But if you read the scriptures in light of this and go, hey, Jesus, how do you see this? What you find is like these things jump off the page at you. You're like, oh, so this is what you meant. Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. It's Romans 12, 1 and 2. Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world. The left-hand side of the slide is the patterns of this world that are controlled by Mammon, by the king of the air, by Satan himself. And it is meant to offer you power, right? So you get these things and I get this power, and you like that because you're over others. But the kingdom of God is not where we're lording over. It's where Jesus is the king. Look at the Israelites. They're like, we need a king. He needs to be tall. He needs to be tall and handsome. Well, we need Saul. Everybody else has got a king. And God's like, well, why you need a king? And of course the prophets were like, dude, like this is a problem. No, God is our king, not some man. And so we've inserted these gods in the place of things. And it's amazing to me. I look out at crypto and I said, okay, what I like about this is crypto isn't evil. AI isn't inherently evil. The internet isn't inherently evil, just as much as any tool like a hammer in my garage is evil. It's the nature and character and the intent of the one who animates that object. That's it. And so the question is, here we are in the pulse chain and in crypto. How are we going to animate this thing in the nature and character of God? Well, we have to ask him. But we have to assume and understand that he's alive and speaks. Because here's the thing, none of this works in this model unless Jesus is alive and he speaks. But I've been told for years that he's a historical figure and he was a really nice guy. But everyone that I experienced in the church was basically saying this guy's dead, except on Easter Sunday, well, he's risen and he's alive. Steve came to me and said, hey, no, this guy that always speaks, he modeled the way for us. He literally said, I don't do anything unless I hear the Father say it or do it. Oh, I mean, I'm about his business. even to the point where he comes out of the wilderness and Satan says to him, hey, man, hey, turn these stones into bread. He's like, no, man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. So the question is, are you living out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God? You could be. All you have to have is interest. You don't have to be a Quaker. You don't have to be a Lutheran. You have to be interested. And the God of all creation is near and is interested in your every inquiry. So do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will, because it's knowable, because Jesus is alive and he speaks and you can ask him yourself. And that's the message that Steve, the gift he gave to me. Go ask him yourself. There's no convincing. This idea of sharing the gospel. Well, what is the gospel? Jesus is alive and he speaks. Ask him yourself. It's amazing. One of the things that we talked about was that there was a man who approached Jesus, and he basically said to him, and he said this to many people, is that because of your faith, basically salvation has come to you in your household. It wasn't through like, you need to make me your Lord and Savior, right? We've created this religious system. Question is, are you interested? And I think what's happening in this world is that people are seeing all these tools and they're confronted with, all right, I got a choice to make. I can either go my own way and I can extract value for myself. I can step on the necks of other people. And what's amazing about this alternative financial system that's happening with the Pulse Chain and Richard Hart's vision and all this kind of stuff is that it's like, I think part of the reason it's chopping sideways and then the reason it's not going to the moon and the reason that I don't think that Richard has deployed all the resources is it's not the appointed time, because it's not meant to be just the next 10,000x, which you want it to be. I think actually God is using this because he needs to stand up an alternative system because the current existing one is going to fail. And what's going to make this thing so amazing and beautiful is that it's going to break the back of the system of mammon. The question is, are there good people who are going to animate this in the nature and character of God, which blesses and protects? And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like, well, what else is there worth doing? Because if you think about this, let's say you get really rich and then you're like, man, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go give a bunch of money to the university and they're going to put my name on the building or the stadium. And you think about this, do not store up your treasures on earth where moth and rust, decay it, right? Store it up in heaven. Well, how do I do that? What's interesting is we get our reward in full when we operate in this left-hand side of this system. And we're just like, yeah, I'll get rich at other people's expense. Or not, maybe, but my intention for what I'm doing is not to receive the peace that transcends all understanding as the commodity, but to use the power that comes from this trade-off of giving my authority over to mammon and making money my God, rather than using it as a tool and animating it in a certain nature and character to bless and protect. I mean, what's crazy is I spent a lot of time in church, folks. And I'm going to tell you, I never heard this stuff before in my life. But it's fundamental. And it's true. And you can probe it and you can ask it. And what's amazing about it is if anybody's out there, and especially, and there would be people in the church, if you went to them and said, you know what, I just want to do what Jesus says to do, they'd say, amen, brother. Congratulations. But if you actually did that, you know what listening to Jesus and walking with Jesus does to the people within the religious system? It really messes up the apple cart of their religious system. It's like, well, if you're doing what Jesus says, you're not doing what my program is. It's highly disruptive, but just like Jesus was, highly disruptive. I'll finish with this. You know probably the story of the woman at the well. Right? Jesus is out there. It's the middle of the day. She's a Sumerian woman. She comes up to the well. And of course, she's doing this because she's ashamed of her lifestyle and how people would judge her. And she's coming during the heat of the day, which people don't normally come. And Jesus is there. and she comes to meet him. And he says, "Hey, woman, give me some water to drink," because she's going to draw it out of the well. And she's like, "Well, you're not supposed to talk to us. You're the Jews. We're the Gentiles. I mean, sorry, we're the Samaritans." And she says, "Yeah, you people, you worship on that mountain." And Jesus says to her, "There's going to come a day when you will worship in spirit and in truth." Meaning you don't have to go inside of this place on this mountain behind this veil with this box. And of course, you think about what the implications of all that stuff are. And to me, it's exactly what Steve said to me. It's like you have access to the creator of all things. All authority has been given to him. All things were created for him and by him. And what's amazing is Peter, James, and John go up the Mount of Transfiguration, and they're like, see Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. He's probably glowing. And a voice comes from heaven and says, "This is my son. Listen to him." It's hard to listen to someone who doesn't speak. Folks, thanks for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt. There are 37 episodes on my channel now there's 53. But if you want to hear from Steve Staggs, which I highly recommend, there's 37 episodes of at least 2 hours apiece of Steve sharing this stuff. This stuff is mind-numbing every time I do it. And this is like the second or third time. This is real wisdom, real truth. And to me, I've always been wondering, what's the meaning of this whole thing, right? Especially when you stare at your dad in a casket. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jesus. Don't mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.